Fortunately, when President Aquino came into office, came into power, one of the most, siguro na ipanido alam the most important decisions made by the revolutionary government of Cory was to nationalize all barangay high schools in the country. That was at the middle of the school year when there were no budgets yet. What a brave and aggressive decision of the former president. There were no DAP yet, there were no DAP, there were no PDAF yet, but she was able to make an executive order, to issue an executive order providing funds for the barangay high schools. At that time, 70% of the operational funds of barangay high schools was in the hands of the barangay officials and the PTA officials. So they had to complement that with about 30 or 40% to make the barangay high schools viable. So let's proceed. When the community colleges were organized, again, these were the efforts of the schools, the high schools, still under DepEd, and the local community, the PTA especially. Wala pa noon yung local autonomy law. That's why if there are local government officials who claim that the barangay high school is their own creation, that is wrong. Because the barangay high school, the barangay and the local colleges were initiated, were established by the local PTAs and the barangays. It was only when the local autonomy law was passed, where there was a provision allowing local government units to open schools. It did not even mention tertiary schools. The original intention was for the local communities, the LGUs, to open basic education institutions, and that would mean elementary and secondary. It was only later when the examples of Makati and the rest, with sufficient financial resources, opened tertiary schools. So the implication is that there are some LGUs which probably cannot very well handle the finances of the local government, local colleges. So the CFO, like in the opening of the ordinary high schools, there is a basic requirement about school sites, basic requirement about faculty, basic requirement about books and so on. These basic requirements we imposed on private schools. Unfortunately, these local schools were open even if there was not adequate compliance with the requirements in the opening of a school or an institution for it to be able to deliver quality instruction. So that is the reason why now we have many local colleges that have been opened without adequate facilities, without financial stability, and with all the problems that contribute not to quality education, that contribute to the other side of quality education, and that is more or less a problem. Like, we don't want our local community colleges to turn out like diploma mills. That should be the concern of community colleges. So the basic requirements are 7. But if you look at, next slide please, if you look at the compliance status in the region, many of these 7 requirements have not been fully complied with by the 16 local colleges of the region. Number 5 is the most serious. There are no plantilla positions. There are no plantillo positions because funds are unstable, not adequate. There is no search committee for president because all the officials act in temporary capacity, in temporary status, job orders, and so on. That's why, like myself, I call myself a president, at least Consuelo de Bobo, assessor being a school administrator only, like you are an administrator of a small office. Does that sound appropriate? So I requested my mayor, I will use the term because in CMO, there is no mention about school administrator. The term school administrator was more appropriate to schools, to local colleges, which squatted in the campuses of the national high schools, using the facilities of the national high schools. So the compromise was to make the principals of the national high schools serve in concurrent capacity as administrator because they administer the buildings and the facilities of the school. So I'd like to make the correction. Like, for example, I call myself president. Siguro akala nila gusto ko lang pangalan ng president. But I followed the rule of the CFO. So those are the basic issues. Many of these local colleges are not compliant with the provisions of the CNO, and there is a deadline on 2014 for these local colleges to cease operation if there is no compliance. I hope that really happens, and I hope that does that, just to demonstrate that we are serious about the quality of education that we deliver. Because if we don't deliver quality education in the local colleges, our local colleges will look like they are backdoors for degrees, and when you pass through the back door, you are not the standard output of the operation of the system. We don't like community colleges to be diploma mills, and that's the reason why we have to be strict about their operation. Well, for people who value education, they should have that kind of thinking. But if there are people who don't value education, that's not matter to them, as long as they serve there and they receive their salary. That should not be the case. We should be very serious about community colleges. Okay, the main issues. Fund allocation for capital outlay. Remember that the community colleges rely on the tuition fees. In most institutions, the salary of personnel comes from tuition fees. And that is provided for in various memoranda circulars, even of DepEd and CHED. But the non-payment of tuition fee or delayed payment of tuition fees in community colleges is very rampant. Therefore, delayed payments of the tuition fees, delayed release of the scholarship fund from the congressman and the governor would mean non-payment of the salary. That's the reason why we could not upgrade the salary of teachers of community colleges. Kawawa naman, and so they feel like you will not be very, very inspired to work when your stomach is crunching. We understand the problem of the instructors. Okay. So there should be fund allocation outside of the tuition fee income of the community college. And this should be outsourced. Siguro, CHED, in a lump sum budget on the national office should appropriate a kind of assistance fund or calamity fund, I would call it, for community colleges So that this capital outlay, like the construction of buildings, the procurement of computers, and so on and so forth, can be provided for. Next, school sites and facilities. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, that was a lapse in the operation, in the establishment of the community colleges. If I were the director of CHED, and I see that these applicants are non-compliant with these requirements, like facilities, the buildings, and so on, I will never have second thoughts about returning the application for the opening of these colleges. We should make a compromise with substandard education. Okay? What other facilities? Remember that education doesn't only require buildings, require school sites. But the more important thing is the kind of learning that goes on, the resources, and the kind of instruction delivered by the teachers in the school. So we have to consider that. The integration of plantilla positions. When the plantilla positions are not created, it will be vulnerable to political intuitions where the politicians, who comes in elected after 3 years and so on, will be changing the personnel. And when there is a fast turnover of personnel, it's going to create a problem, myriads of problems, in terms of records, in terms of finances, in terms of social relations, in terms of political malfunctions. All of these problems will come. And because of that, there is no stability in the community colleges. There is no stability. So community colleges stand like banana republics, if they were so, because they are not stable financially, physically, and structurally in terms of management. So plantilla positions, basic, for example, is the appointment of a registrar. The registrar is a key position when there are malpractices in the records of students. Nobody would know it until after there's a problem about